Hello, everybody. My name's Rebecca Chaplin. I am the editor of Car Dealer, and next we're going to be talking about when is the right time to expand. The size of your dealership has a lot of cost implications, I'm sure you all well know. More cars means bigger overheads, more risk, and more staff needed. But how can you know when the time is right to make that step for your business? Our next panel have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to taking chances and growing businesses. Please welcome them to the stage. I can tell already they're going to be a really rowdy bunch. Behave, please. Exactly. So, to my left, I've got Sean Cantillon, previously dealer principal of Ford, Subaru, and used car dealership Jeff Cox Derby. But this year, you set up your own dealership, Cedar Specialist Cars. Then next to him, we've got Martin Forbes, who is now the COO of Cox Automotive, but in July, you're going to be becoming the CEO. Correct. Not confusing at all. Then we've got John O'Hanlon, CEO and founder of Waylands Automotive, but previously CEO of Ridgeway. And then on the end, we've got Neil Smith, who is the operations director of Imperial Cars, who are obviously going through quite a big expansion at the moment, and you've been looking after all of that. So I'm going to start with Sean. What forced you to make the decision to start your own dealership?
I think in the current environment, I think, it's a digital marketplace, and I think it's about creating something that is brand new and taking the experience that I've actually learned to do something myself and for my family, and start a little empire, basically.
And John, you've last year you set up Waylands Automotive?
Yeah, November.
It feels like a long time ago, but it really wasn't, was it?
It's been 6 months,
Yeah.
6 hard months.
And so why did you decide to do that?
In fairness, I think there's still a lot of life in the retail model. I've made a lot of great contacts, and it was finding the right opportunity to go again. So with Volvo, with the area that we're working within, it felt the right opportunity at the right time.
And Neil, you're pushing for a big expansion at the moment. Why are you doing that?
I think we've seen, obviously, used cars in the last 9-12 months has had a resurgence, really. And we've seen the opportunities out there to expand, spread our reach across the UK, do it a slightly different way to some of the other dealers in our sector. So we're taking on smaller sites rather than looking at some of the larger sites, which was our model 2 to 3 years ago, but we've sort of switched that around now. And it's about opportunity, really, rather than is it the right time. It's what opportunity exists out there, and to take that opportunity to spread our reach across the UK.
I obviously say why in sort of a cautious way, because we have heard a lot over yesterday about the market and how things are going. So, Martin, what are your thoughts on the current market and what opportunities are out there?
I mean, I think if you look at the market at the moment, we know you can probably split it into two, can't you? I mean, we can all tell from the numbers that used new cars are obviously being a bit more challenged. And we're just seeing a slow in that compared to last year. But we always have to take stock that, last year was a bumper year. And actually, if you look at the performance this year and you look at that across the previous sort of 4 or 5 years, it's actually still performing very well. So I do agree with John here in that, there's still a lot of buoyancy, and actually we've got to sort of keep confidence in the market. The clear shift and where a lot of focus has been this year is used. And everyone says, is this the year for used cars? And I think actually probably is now the year for used cars. And I think actually if you look at the strategy that not only some of the businesses like Imperial are taking, we've got Mr. Woodell sitting down there from Big Motoring World, and you're looking at their expansion plans and their model. I think you've got to actually look at that. And you've also looked at the big franchise businesses that are actually now trying to get into that more used car model. You just take Cedar, for example, and look at what they've done with Car Shop and the Car People.
Did any of you have any apprehension when going through these expansions or new setups? You can all jump in, you eager crew.
I think there's always reservations, and it's like anything, it's always going to be a gamble. And whenever is the right time, I think you've just got to kind of take the ball by the horns and do it. And if you do, if the rate of expansion, if you start small, take the baby steps, lay the foundations, you can build something that's actually going to sustain.
I think you've it's calculated gamble. It's calculated risk, isn't it? Everything we do. So we can run numbers. You mix that up with experience and gut feel. But just because the overall market's down doesn't mean that you can't have a bigger share of it. Whether that be in new car sales, used car sales, or even after sales. You know, I think a lot of our industry has been average, you know, for a very long time. And now what we're seeing is people looking at what the very best, what does great look like? And I think that's where you'll see the winners come through, the people who are able to take advantage of the opportunities going forward.
There was something someone said to me yesterday, I can't quite remember who, but that there are losses in the market, but they are, sounds a bit mean, but they are opportunities for other people. Would you agree with that?
So, yes. Absolutely. And yes.
Did you feel you had any risk with, it's probably quite a lot of weight on your shoulders as well, because you've got bosses above you who might turn around and say, why are you doing this?
Well, they're the ones making the decision most of the time, so it's their money, isn't it? But no, I mean, we're strategic, we're tactical, we get offered an opportunity, we'll look at the location, the chimney pots, what the potential is there, we'll look at competition, but quite frankly, as long as it fits our model, it's in a location where we don't see a lot of coverage, then strategically it's not a difficult decision to make. We know what model we work to, we know what we need to turn in terms of stock out of that particular site, and if the opportunity is right, the price is right, the overheads are right, then it's not that great a risk, really.
Martin, you've obviously grown quite a few businesses. Would you say that there are any kind of golden rules for making a success?
I just think when you talk about golden rules, I think the landscape's slightly changed, to be honest. I think, you know, we're sitting here and we talk about property when it's the right time to expand. I think the question also has to be, how are we going to expand? Because I think that when you look at property now, there's the changes. If you even take physical property, I mean, I sometimes look at it and I don't have to make the decision of whether I'm going to spend, where I've seen some of these big superstores, Gym Palaces of 17 million that's opening up for some of these big dealerships. I mean, I'm an ex-accountant. I look at that, it scares me. I just think about what's the payback time for that. So is that the right, a question, is that the right model? When you think about where do you buy that stock or land? So take some of the Westfield, you look at what Rockar are doing and turning up in places like Next, taking small spaces, trying to take that sort of digital approach, which I guess is probably got to be a big focus for it. And how do you get that online-offline blend? So I think you just need to be really careful about, is this about going off and buying big spaces? And I think for some businesses that can work, especially in the used car market. But I think in the new car space, you've got to start looking at saying, is there a smarter way to get efficiencies, reduce costs, and actually get that blend of offline and offline? And I think we've got to be asking ourselves that question is, what's the right property strategy, not necessarily what is the right sort of, let's go out and invest in more property.
Well, is there a way of looking at it that you are a property developer taking on these new sites, though, and that by building these Gym Palaces, as I love them being called, one day you'll be able to sell that for tenfold?
I mean, I think John's probably the right one to deal with that question because he's been through it.
I think it's about a balance because it's great looking forward to that potential profit, and actually a lot of motor dealer pensions have been paid and funded by their property. The problem is it takes a chunk of capital, and whether that's 30 or 40% deposit, you've got to find that at the beginning when you might not have so much money. Our Ridgeway worked very hard at creating a balance, and we ended up about 60-40, and that felt right in terms of enough control, because you do have control over your property, but also enough working capital in the business to continue to take advantage of acquisitions, because we were car dealers, not property developers.
So how big was Ridgeway when you started with them?
13 million turnover, 2 sites.
Yeah, and by the end, what?
800 million, 34 sites.
And can you tell, we only have like 15 minutes, but can you tell me a bit about the journey of how it grew?
Let me take you back. Well, I think you touched on it earlier when you said there's a degree of strategic planning, and we did that wonderful 5-year plans throughout our journey. And that went from, we wanted to be a 50 to 60 million, we wanted to be 150 million, then we wanted to be a 300 million. And what we found was, as we did more opportunities were presented. The clever part was picking the right opportunities for us. I think the other part we were good at was investing in management earlier. So we didn't get an opportunity, then look surprised. We were slightly heavier in terms of management, no pun intended. But that worked for us. It meant we could take advantage and turn around things more quickly.
Would any of you have any advice for someone who's thinking about maybe setting up on their own, or whether they should take the step to grow from maybe 30 cars to 60 cars?
I think the key rule that I certainly follow is don't go too big too quick. It's very simple. It's a simple rule to follow. It's what I follow. You build, and then you put the infrastructure underneath it to support, and you just keep building up. It's very easy to, with everything that's on offer, with such stock funding facilities and everything, to think, 20, 30, 40, up to 100 cars or whatever. But then it's actually managing, it's a beast that can very quickly become out of control. So, my advice, and it's certainly how I'm operating now, is just starting very small, taking the baby steps, and putting strong foundations in place.
Neil, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think John's point's right as well. Working capital, we went through 2 years. Within 25 months, we opened 3 sites, a 350 car, a 400, a 450 car. 2 of those sites we own, 1 is leased, and that hurt us for about 12 months. So our profits dropped, we didn't have the working capital there, so we had to consolidate. We left that probably about a year and a half, and then started to look again at what we could do. And rather than look at those sort of sites, which are a drain and can take 5 to 6 months to get traction and start to deliver a return, especially when you're looking at a maybe 5 to 6 month refurb before you even open. What we do now is we're taking pre-existing dealerships that, as you said, it might be an Audi site that someone's moved out to a 7, 8, 10 million build. That site is a lovely site. It's there. It's got a history of motor trade. We'll be able to open the doors on that site within 2 weeks. We drop our IT in there, our signage, people, and then that site's up and running. Challenge then is stock. So where we've opened 5 sites in 9 months, and we've got a 6th site opening, which will be the 12th in 6 weeks, it's stock. It's getting that stock through, getting it prepared, and making sure that we've got enough stock to spread across the sites, so we're not losing opportunities for sales because of reduced stock.
We have seen there's been a couple of franchise dealerships that have closed recently. Would you guys move into those, or do you think that maybe that's not worked for a reason, that location?
Well, every site we've taken on in the last 9 months has been either an ex-Honda, ex-Audi, or ex-JLR site. And those sites, for us, they're great locations. And a lot of the time, it's not that they haven't worked, they've been moved, or they've moved to an 8 to 10 million build. So that leaves a well-appointed, well-fitted out site that we can literally just jump into.
Yeah, I think some of the issues you might find is those dealerships may be subscale, so they just might not be big enough. So whether that's to deliver the customer experience on new, whether it's to have a big enough used car display, whether it's to actually have the after-sales capability, that might be the challenges with some of those dealerships when you see the pictures of the sites they were in.
So how do you choose which locations you're going to be in? Does any location work, or?
Well, again, if you get offered the opportunity, we'll look at where we're pulling business from around that area. If we're not pulling business from it, if it's 60, 70 miles from a site, we'll always look for something like a 50-mile radius overlap. People will travel 35, 50 miles for the right car consistently. And again, even if the site, our Newport Pagnell site, is 12 miles from our Northampton site, but we've got a different profile of stock there. So we're SUV, because it was originally a JLR site, we're SUV, we're high-end prestige there, limited stock, so we're putting 60, 65 cars there. That doesn't then detract from Northampton, which is a 350, 400 car site, and it's more volume sales. So we don't not consider anything that's put to us, but we'll go and do the research and look at what the footfall opportunities are, the chimney pots, and how we're doing in that area at that time. And if there is business to be had, then we'll go out and try and conquest that business.
And John, you've been building dealerships from scratch. I would say that as if you're there with your own bricks and...
There's a vision for you, me and my hard hat. I think a lot of it is just what's available, and a lot of the opportunities are time frame. You know, you've got to deliver within a 2-3 year period. So it comes down to what opportunities are available and then making the best of what you've got. An example of that would be Reading, where we've got a fantastic location that we will move to, but that's in December. So I've had 12 months in a trade counter site with one used car display, and it's hard, but that's what you've got to do to get to the prize at the end of the day.
And Sean, you're doing most of your business online then?
Yeah, it's where it all starts. I mean, for me, the location, as long as it's quite accessible, it's not high on the list of priority really, because the majority of the business obviously will come through the advertisement and everything else. So for me, the location of the property isn't as important. I mean, the days where you would get in the car and drive around and search and go dealership to dealership, you know, the frontage, a nice, you know, a front roadside location will be quite important, but providing it can be found on a satellite navigation with a postcode and it kind of hugs a main artery through the country, it's not as important for me and my business model.
Just following up from what Sean's saying there, I mean, I think, you know, we make this statement, I'll make a bold statement, is that if everyone here and everyone realises that actually the first showroom for anybody is actually the online digital showroom. And that's actually got to be the number one focus. And I think I've gone to meetings sometimes and people turn around to me and say, oh Martin, I appreciate that our website is our second sort of dealership. Well, no, it's not. It's your first. And to Sean's point as well, I mean, Google have just done a lot of research on this. And what they said is effectively, you know, 97% of people still buy cars offline, but 52% have said that they will be willing to buy a car online. And then on the second point of that, 40% of people search for car dealers. 47% go to car dealers that they didn't already know, but they found through their online experience. So it goes back to, you know, the Sean's point. We've really got to focus, first of all, is think digital first. And it's the same way that we're turning into our business. You've got to think digital first. And actually, the physical sites are actually that blend of bringing that online first experience and then bringing it offline and getting that correct. And I think there's still a bit of evolution that people need to think about. And it's pleasing to see that Sean's kind of really taking that lead.
I was going to say, so are you focusing on a kind of local reach or a national reach for your sales?
I think it depends on the profile of stock. I mean, when you're talking your more volume type product, your catchment radius usually is probably within 40 miles, because if somebody's buying a sub £5,000 car, they're probably not going to travel as far as they would if they were buying, a Porsche 911 for 50, 60, 70,000 pounds. Then people would then travel. So, I mean, that affects on how I kind of go to market and how I price to bring that customer, because the dream, it's always going to be nice to sell cars in your locality and see everybody driving around, you know, in the cars that you've actually sold in your hometown, which it's nice to have. But then it's also nice to bring people from a broader postcode and the length and breadth of the country, and sometimes from other countries, which, you know, has happened in the past as well. So,
and I mean, Neil, I'm sure you'd agree, because you put a lot of effort into your website and transferring those people from online to offline. So where does most of your footfall come from? Does it come from people driving past or from people seeing you online?
Majority will come from online, so 90% of our marketing is digital. But we still see 90% of traffic into the sites is from within a 50-mile radius. That doesn't mean that 10%, that means that 10% are travelling in excess of that for the type of cars that we sell, so we specialise prestige end of the market. Having said all that, one of our best performing sites of the new sites is one that's got a lovely frontage on the Dudley Road in Hales Owen, and it does pull traffic in. So it's a blend. You know, you can't ignore that element of it, but we certainly don't chase that in the marketing mix now. It's digital first. If we need to strategically support a site that might be having not quite as good a month, we might turn to a bit of Sky AdSmart, a little bit of radio, but again, strategic and tactical. And I'd say 90% of what we do is digital. That drives the traffic. And again, but that digital marketing is also focused within a 50-mile radius of the sites.
Are there any mistakes that you guys have made in your career that you've learned really important lessons from?
None at all.
I knew you were gonna
lots,
say that.
lots. As I said, we went through some growth pains 2 to 3 years ago, and we have learned from that, and that's why the model has distinctly changed now in terms of the way we're expanding, and it's far less risk the way we're doing it now. So yeah, we've learned a lot in the last 2 to 3 years.
Would anyone else fess up?
Probably from my point of view, I wish I would have done what I've actually done sooner, because obviously the motor trade it's under the spotlight. There's a lot of change happening in the UK. It is a difficult time to start a new business and actually go to market. Has the boat been missed? No, definitely not. But the big wins now, I think, are a lot more few and far between. So I would have liked to have done this 5-7 years ago. And that's it, really.
I mean, the only thing I would say from my perspective is, I'd argue that I haven't been brave enough in the past. We see disruption coming, and often the case is I have been in that situation where I've seen it coming, but perhaps I've tried to stay in a business model and try and prolong that rather than actually taking the leading edge and disrupt our own business rather than being disrupted by others. And I think you take this market where we are today, I do believe that this retail model, although it's still got a lot of legs, I think that really needs to evolve over the next 2 or 3 years. And I think big dealerships and people like John and Neil and others just need to be really brave and understand that there's that disruption coming, and you just really need to think about what that looks like.
I think in terms of bad decisions, we had the saying that you make 10 decisions a day. 8 decisions will be fantastic, 1 will be average, 1 will be poor. Just make sure the poor one isn't important. And it's difficult because you can look back and the judgment was always, would you make the same decision at the same time, or have you learned anything from it? And you're always hopeful that, given the context, you could look at it, you've learned something from that decision where you got it wrong. And in fairness, I think maybe sometimes we were a little bit soft, a little bit too tolerant, and actually sometimes it's better just to lay the path that you want to follow, and actually then drive it through. Still do it in the right way, with the right culture, but just be able to do it a little bit quicker.
I think at the other end of the scale as well, which I'm sure a lot of people would like to be in this position, but when the decision was made to sell Ridgeway, did you ever have any apprehension that the business could have grown more? And
well, I was sat on the stage at Silverstone 2 years ago, literally the day before we went and signed the docs. So I was in terribly good form that day.
We could have killed you the next day.
That could have been an exclusive. Yeah, I think we'd hit a sweet spot in terms of our size, our scale, our culture. Everything was in the right place. And that was, I never got to quite finish, and that's probably why I've gone back in. I still got to finish off that itch. Hopefully it won't take 18 years this time. Hopefully we can do it, it won't be 18 months, but a lot quicker.
I was going to say, did you ever think about trying a different industry instead?
I think I'm a one-trick pony, in fairness. You build your experience, you build your relationships within a sector, and this is the sector I really enjoy.
Do we have any questions from the audience before we wrap up? Oh.
Yes, Martin, you talked about online to offline, and you're sort of driving, and everybody's driving traffic to the forecourt via digital. Where do you see offline to online when the actual consumer and the buyers are on the forecourt? The application of technology and how that actually increases the interaction between the sales guys and the consumer and the customer. Is there a danger that interaction might get taken away?
I'm trying to see whether there's a loaded question there. I mean, you know what? You need, there's different strategies, isn't there, for online, and there's going to be strategy for new car. And I think we all need to be aware, and I don't know where this is, the question's been angled, but I think The OEMs clearly have a strategy of where they want to take their online presence and in the way in which they probably perceive the interaction with the dealers and the dealerships. And you can be a cynical and say that dealerships could be potentially become a facilitation centre. And I'm sure that the OEMs would argue that that's not what they're looking to do, but actually they are looking to drive more online interaction because that's the way that consumers now want to buy. And you have to go where the consumer needs to go, and if you're not there, you'll lose out. I think that's probably going to happen more at pace, and we can already see it happening. And there is more and more online, physical attribution points happening online already. So even take the Partex experience, a hugely offline process, but actually there's now solutions out there such as unshamedly dig like a Price and Go, that what we're doing is effectively trying to bring that as online as possible to facilitate it. I think used cars is probably slightly different in that I think that's going to take that's going to be a sort of slower burn, I think, in order for customers to get sort of comfortable that they're going to buy online. So I think that's going to be in a different environment. But I do think there's risk, and I think dealers need to work hard with the OEMs and understand, and I think there's that frenemy approach between the OEM and the dealer of what is that future retail experience for the dealer compared to where the OEM see it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I agree on that. There is this sort of propensity to try and do everything online, but it takes away a little bit of that sort of personal interaction that people want to. The pain point really is on the things like the part exchange and that side of it, but it's getting that balance right, isn't it?
Correct, and I just think we've got consumers act in many different ways, and you could have 100 consumers and they all want to have a different blend of an online and offline experience, and that's going to take a long time. You might get somebody today who would buy a car online 100% the whole process. You might get one that doesn't even want to look online. And I think we still need to have those opportunities and choices, and that's why it goes back. I mean, John made that statement first. There's still a lot of legs in this retail market in the current model, but it is changing, and there's a lot of changing forces on it.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much to my panellists. I hope that there's people out there who are inspired to go on and maybe change their businesses or start one up themselves. If you'd like to give them a round of applause, we're going to walk off the stage.